I think I should take questions now because I'm losing my voice. Is that okay? Adam? So, I don't know what to say, but I'm sure there's stuff that I know that you might want to know. You're pointing at someone. Who are you pointing at?
Second row.
Interview. Tell us about your first interview at Interview. How'd that go down?
My first interview, well, the first issue I did, Rita Hayworth was on the cover. And Bob wrote a poem about Rita Hayworth. And when Andy never saw the magazine until it actually came out. And he said one thing, he said, no more poems. I think my first interview was with John Cromwell, who was a big Hollywood director, or possibly King Vidor. We interviewed a lot of those great directors, the old Hollywood directors, because nobody was really interested in them anymore. And then the European directors, they would always come up because they, unlike most Americans, they really liked Warhol films. They saw them as art films and respected them on that level. Americans tended to think of them as sort of softcore porn. I don't know, I've never seen really a consciously funny porn film, but I guess it must exist. But no, I mean, Andy made comedies. And
Glenn, which were the Warhol films that you reviewed in the Village Voice that piqued Warhol's attention?
Oh, okay, that's another mistake. It wasn't me, although that was one of my first jobs. Andrew Saris, who was a great film scholar and a wonderful man, actually. He was my film history teacher at Columbia. And he would let his better criticism students write for The Voice. So Bob and I were picked, and I wrote about Pink Flamingos, El Topo, like that. And Bob wrote about Andy Warhol's Flesh, I think, and that attracted their attention because it got, The Voice was a very important place for Warhol, and it wasn't that easy for him to get a good review there. So Bob was like raving, comparing Andy to Michelangelo, which had something to do with Joe D'Alessandro's chest, I think. But yeah, that was my first. But it was interesting. I mean, we had a funky lineup. I mean, we'd have like David Hockney. He was one of the early artists that we had, and then we also liked hooking up personalities. Like Dennis Hopper had just spent ages making the last movie with the millions of dollars he had made on Easy Rider, which was made out, next to a cocaine factory in South America. So I didn't want to have to be the icebreaker. So I took Candy Darling with me to interview Dennis, and it worked like a charm. She just charmed him off his feet, and that's when he was married to Daria Halprin. Anybody remember her from Zabriskie Point, Antonioni film? Beautiful girl, but she got mixed up with bank robbers. Political bank robbers. Bank robbers are okay. Political bank robbers, stay away from them. Anyway, so yeah, that was one of my favorite things to do, was have someone who was not a journalist, but was a personality to back me up. Later I got my own personality, but I needed help in the beginning. Drag queens are great partners in doing an interview.
There's a question over here in the aisle.
What was the relationship between Andy Warhol or was there one, and Robert Mapplethorpe?
So what's the relationship between Warhol and Mapplethorpe is the question.
They're both dead, so I can say, right? The great thing about living a long time is that you get to, like, people believe you because you get the last word. Bob Colacello, who is still my friend after some years of not being friends, loved Robert Mapplethorpe. And he brought him up to the factory all the time. And Andy would say, he smells. He smells bad. Do you smell that? Andy didn't like Robert Mapplethorpe. And I didn't either, really. I didn't like his work. But then he was doing collages. And I think when he became, you know, a sort of celebrity portraitist, he got better. He was good with flowers, too. But Mapplethorpe didn't really, I mean, Mapplethorpe really admired himself, I think. And I think he thought of Andy as someone who could help him out. And that was during his Patti Smith period, where they would come in looking like dangerous, like Bonnie and Clyde.
Question back here from the man about 4 rows from the back. Yeah.
So it was mentioned earlier at the top that you were involved with Madonna's book, X.
Yeah.
I was just curious about how that came about and sort of the creative process behind that.
Well, I knew Madonna for a long time before that. I actually met Madonna. Jean-Michel Basquiat brought her over to my house for Thanksgiving dinner. I think maybe I'd seen her like dancing at the Danceteria or something, doing a show, but that was how I met her. And you know, we hit it off really, really well. She was a very funny person, fun. And she and Jean-Michel didn't last very long as a couple, but we remained friends. I interviewed her many times. And the book, the book was actually photographed before I got involved. And I had worked a lot with Stephen Meisel and Fabian Baron. Fabian was the art director I brought in to interview in 1990, and we worked together at Barneys, and we did like all of Calvin for years and years. So Stephen and Fabian we were like kind of a team, and I did it. You know, we had all the photographs, and actually Madonna and I did a lot of the sort of basic layout of the book, and wrote the cartoon book in the back and stuff like that. We did a lot of it by fax machine, which is funny because I don't even have a fax machine anymore. But, it was fun, but all those dirty MASH notes that you sent to me are fading away.
Question right here in the center.
Blaine, could you describe some memorable moments at Max's Kansas City?
I literally went to Max's every night. Candy Darling lived across the street from me. She would, so we would share a cab, go down there. And Max's was interesting because it was very territorial. The front was what we call the abstract expressionist alcoholics. The middle was kind of like music business, like Steve Paul, the manager of Johnny Winter, and Danny Fields was there a lot, although he was a backroom person. And then the back room was sort of, you know, where all the freaks were and the famous people. You know, so on any given night, you know, you might see like the New York Dolls, Todd Rundgren, Bobby Kennedy, Seriously. Scott Barry, who was like a great fashion designer. All the fashion designers hung out at Max's because that was like, things were really, creative people were really integrated in those days. I don't know. I mean, the memorable nights, I remember so many. I don't know. I mean, there was something about Johnny Thunders getting a blowjob. I can't talk about that. I will say that my most memorable moment was introducing Candy, Darling, and Divine. And we were at the round table, which was kind of the table, and I was like, Candy, I'd like you to meet Divine. She said, I'm enchanted. I'm your biggest fan. No, I'm your biggest fan. And it was like that. They were just smitten with one another.
My question is, there are a lot of artists that Andy didn't like. So whose work did Andy like?
Surprisingly, he loved a lot of artists. I mean, I was trying to think, who did he really hate? And I think probably he wasn't so keen on, if you're from Marfa, I apologize, but I think maybe he was not keen on minimal art. You know, Richard Serra, Donald Judd, Carl Andre, even before he threw his wife out the window. But he loved, like, he liked Kossuth, surprisingly. He loved Keith Saunier. I think he thought photographers weren't really artists, to tell you the truth. I know that's offensive to some people today, but I think he felt like, you know, it's kind of funny because his work was basically photographic in nature, but I think he felt like it was lazy not to add something or bring something else to it, manipulate it somehow.
Other questions? There's a Twitter question about a favorite memory of Warhol in the factory building itself.
Well, the place that I worked, there were a few. The first one was before my time. That was the silver factory that was painted by Billy Name, who passed away a couple of months ago. He was a great photographer. He took all the best pictures at the factory. And so I worked at 33 Union Square West, and that was very, Andy had made some money then. And so there was a lot of high-end Art Deco, and it looked fancy. What was the question?
For the memory of a single memory.
Oh, okay. So
Warhol in the factory.
Well, I remember him hiding when we got robbed. I mean, he had been shot, and but still our security was pretty lax. And I went out to cash my check one day, and I came back, and everybody was like, and Andy was still on the floor. It really hit him, because some guys, I guess they thought it was Friday was payday, so they came to get our money. I just remember him, he always had the phone in his hand. And we would the phone would ring, and we'd say, factory. He'd say, don't say that, say studio. He thought it was that had been overplayed, but it was good for his image anyway.
Man in the blue jacket.
Can you talk about writing How to Be a Man?
Well, I thought, I'd been doing the style guy for a long time, and it actually started in Details magazine. And when they hired the editor of Maxim to take it over, I asked if I could go to another magazine. So I wound up at GQ, and I thought, and I developed a big audience. So I thought, well, I should do a book for that audience, because I've always had kind of one foot in this world and one foot in that world, but this foot had gotten big enough that it needed it needed to be served. I don't know. I wrote it really quickly, and I wish I could figure out how I did that, because I have a book about the art world now that's really late. So if you don't mind.
Let's take two more questions. Cara, do you have a question?
Can you talk a little bit about the social aspect of making Interview magazine? Because in the back there are always those, social pages of people out at parties, but also who decided who got interviewed? Were they friends? Were you hoping to make them friends?
Well, do you mean Bob Colacello's Out? That was a gossip column. I mean, we had Fran Lebowitz, who did The Best of the Worst, until movie companies started banning her from screenings. And because I thought she would make a great film critic, and who else was going to write about the Doberman gang? So Bob was a socialite. He was like what we used to call a walker. He had lots of friends who were older ladies whose husbands didn't like to go out quite as much as they did. And so Bob was ready for that at all times. He was the only Republican in our midst, actually. He was upset about the Nixon thing. So I actually, once when I was mad at him, I wrote a copy of his column, except that I took his actual column and changed the names to like Mussolini, like that. He laughed. He said, "You're not going to publish that, are you?" I said, "No." I hope I can find it. I feel like I'm cheating because I'm not a good speaker. I mean, I'm a good speaker if somebody asks me a question, but
Well, I wanted to get one more
this is
audience.
why I gave up stand-up comedy.
Can we do one more question? Can we end with a joke from your routine?
No. No, let's answer. They're
Okay,
asking.
in the back.
Can you tell me about your relationship with Rolling Stone magazine, maybe in Joe Armstrong, with you being interviewed?
Well, I worked for Rolling Stone probably for the shortest amount of time of any job I ever had. They had offered me a job to go to San Francisco, and I didn't want to do that. So they said, okay, you can run the New York office. And so I took that, and let's just say that Jan and I had conflicting views on quite a few things. I don't know, his agenda didn't really fit in with mine. But I did have a great, before Joe Armstrong, there was a great guy, Lawrence DeRocher, who was the publisher. And he was great, because when I wanted to quit, he said, "Sue me, I'll take care of it." And that's how it worked out. I sued them and they paid me. But I just didn't want to have meetings in Jan's hotel room at 11 o'clock at night with Johnny Mathis playing.
Out of all the jobs you had, what's been your favorite?
Well, I every time I worked for an interview, I loved it, even when it ended disastrously. Just because I liked the idea of it. And so I always enjoyed that. I don't know, not the needlepoint job, not Republic Steel. I don't know. I never really wanted to have a job. I mean, being an editor is kind of a great job if you're the boss. And I can only have a job if I'm the boss. So I liked being a creative director for Barneys because they would let us do really crazy stuff. And they would just say, like, Gene Pressman, who was a great executive, he'd say, "Amaze me." And so we would do like really some wild stuff, and they let us do it. I mean, we had a campaign that was all like Magnum photography. It was like a lot of famous photographers, and we reused their pictures. And there was a shot from one of the greats of two guys like in the 1950s probably in hats and trench coats smashing each other on the street in an all-out fist fight. And the New York Times, and the caption was, "Tastes differ." And the New York Times rejected it, and I was so proud. Actually, the proudest I've ever been of work was when it was either rejected or made fun of. I mean, the campaign that President Clinton wanted Calvin to be investigated over, which happened during the Monaco-Lewinsky period, he demanded the Justice Department look into us for child pornography, even though there was absolutely no sex and everybody was 18 years old or over. But we did get satirized on Beavis and Butthead. And it was like, "Beavis, show me your butt, show me your butt." And I was so proud. And then when, the Brad Pitt thing, I mean, they didn't run the good one, but the Brad Pitt Chanel ad, we got satirized for that, and that was a proud moment. Anytime you get satirized on Saturday Night Live, you're doing something right.
Do you ever get tired of talking about Andy Warhol?
Yeah, well, I don't talk about him unless I get paid for it. I mean, it comes up once in a while. I miss him, all the way in the back.
What kinds of things did you do to have to leave interview all those different times?
You really want to hear that? Well, the first time Paul Morrissey really didn't like me, and so we had a big conflict, and I had what I thought was a really good job offer, making a lot more money working for Rolling Stone, and I just took it. And then the second time, I think I told the story about my 17-year revenge. So aside from that, the last time I learned never be in a family business if it's not your family.
Yeah,
creative class in New York has been squeezed out because of money or anything like that? And do you find that there's anything going on these days that can maybe have a scene much like what the Warhol scene was, or the scene in the East Village in the 80s? Is there anything that you're seeing now? I know you have a young son. Is there anything that excites you now?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of great stuff going on, but I think, you have to remember that we didn't have the internet. So in a way, you had to be at a center, whether it was LA or New York, to infiltrate, the apparatus that controlled that industry, whether it was the music industry or publishing or whatever. And today, I don't know. I think it's still the capital of the art world in New York, but it's not the capital of art production. And I think that's really a healthy thing. Because I think when all the artists, I have so many friends that left Cleveland, left Minnesota, left Akron. We weren't going to stay. I was not staying in Cleveland. Jim Jarmusch was not staying in Akron. James Chance was not staying in Milwaukee. We had to get out to find like-minded people. And that had the unfortunate consequence of depleting cities of their artists and leaving them, just kind of bereft and subject to, what's on TV. That became culture, disaster. So I guess that's it. Yeah. I think things are looking up, but you're not going to get a loft in New York to, do your big paintings. Those days are gone. But that's good.
I think that's all the time that we have, but it's been a real pleasure to have Glenn here. If you can join me in.
Good. Could you? Could you do that introduction again? I'm sorry I didn't have a speech, but, keeping it real.